So first of all, I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their busy schedules to participate in this webinar. Definitely had some very good feedback on it. It's kind of interesting because you'll see people that will come back and view the webinar multiple times because Howard really does get into some very technical information. So it ends up being something where you can glean one little piece of information every time you watch it. So people will either come back to get clarifying points, or they'll go through and look for other gems of information. Now, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jason Spangler. I'm the flooring division manager here at Wagner Meters. I'm responsible for not only the concrete side of the business, but I'm also responsible for the small hand meters for testing the moisture content of wood, finished wood products, wood subfloors, things of that nature. Everything revolving around flooring. I will say that we're going to do some questions here as far as Q&A via email. So if you do have any questions, please put the question in via email, and I'll get to as many of them as possible. If for some reason either I'm not able to get to your question or you think of something after the fact, please don't hesitate to give me a call. Again, it's Jason Spangler. My phone number is 800-634-9961, and it's extension 235. So with that, let's take a look at some of these questions. Looks like Robert has one. What's an acceptable RH level on concrete to install tile or natural stone? What sealer can be used that will not affect the bond to concrete? So the first thing, as far as what RH level is acceptable for tile and natural stone, I typically have to go back to, and I know that I'm going to get the acronym wrong, but the Tile Council, you need to go back to them. They should have some thresholds that they would have, or they would recommend. Being that they are a very strong industry association, a lot of times the tile manufacturers will rely on them to give some of that information. You can also look to the manufacturers of the tile or the natural stone. Usually it's not the tile or natural stone as much as it may be the grout or the thin set that's being used. What I will say is that when we look at a sealer that can be used, I hear a lot of times, right, wrong, or indifferent, but I'll hear a lot of times with tile and stone, there's a lot of crack isolation or uncoupling membranes that people will use, that they claim that those don't have to have any kind of or there's no moisture maximum with those products because they're actually laying over the top of the concrete, and then you're sticking to those. Again, I don't claim to be a tile and stone expert, but those are some of the things that I've heard. On the other side of it, if you don't want to use something like that, there are definitely a lot of different products out there. Most people will say that 2-part epoxy products, or at least epoxy type of membranes, are probably the gold standard at this point for moisture mitigation. There's a lot of different manufacturers out there. If you really want to get into some individual stuff like that, don't hesitate to call me. Chris, does aggregate size have an effect on the moisture emission of concrete moisture during curing? One of the things aggregate size can kind of have an issue with is when you drill a hole. If you get into a big piece of aggregate, you're probably going to be skewing your relative humidity readings. As far as aggregate size, yes, I would assume it would have an issue, but I think more than anything is going to be when you look at that in combination with more or less moisture, how the concrete hydrates, the amount of the pore size you're going to have, the capillary size you're going to have. You start looking at poorer quality concrete when you start looking at some of those things. So I haven't seen anything specifically about aggregate size, but I would say in combination with the other stuff that you probably would have some issues with that. Is there an ASTM F2170 procedure or equivalent for testing RH in an elevated concrete slab on deck? Specifically, 3 inches of concrete on 9/16 inch corrugated steel form deck. Well, and this one's from David. So I guess I'm not 100% understanding the question because, and I say because, we have people that will utilize our probes and do relative humidity testing on elevated decks every day. I do find the dimensions that you're giving me here a little bit odd because a 9/16 corrugated steel seems to be a little bit small when it comes to the overall size of the hat on the steel. But again, I don't claim to have seen everything. When you're looking at 3 inches, you're going to be going in, again, steel decking on the bottom, slabs only drawing from one side. Usually you're going to find that people will try to identify where the deep section of that corrugation's at and then go 40% of that. Obviously what I'm saying right now is the ASTM standard is completely silent on the placement of the sensor as far as, where to place it. But, as far as people using it and doing the testing on a consistent basis, absolutely. So the way they'll identify some of the areas is they'll actually get a fairly inexpensive metal detector. I saw actually they had them at one of the big box stores. You can get them online. Bosch has them, Zircon has them. And the signal in the meter works a lot like a stud finder would for finding a wood stud in a wall, but you can put it on the surface of the concrete. And it's usually strong enough to pick up, again, depending on how much coverage you have over the metal, it's usually strong enough to pick up the high part of the metal, but not so strong that it'll pick up the deepest part. And so you can scan across it, pick up the high part, scan across, pick up the high part, and then go right in the middle. Now, based on what you're saying, as far as 9/16 inch, as far as the height of that hat, that one may be a little bit harder to do with a metal detector. It may be something you may have to do some pilot holes to determine where you're at, and then grid that out on the floor to make sure that you're drilling the appropriate spot. Have one here asking about copy of the presentation. Unfortunately, we can't send out copies of this presentation as part of an agreement. What I can say is that if you do, and actually what I can do is I can send you, there's a link to different segments of this video. If you go to our YouTube channel, so it's Wagner Meters YouTube channel, you'll find different pieces that have been pulled out of, and they have very specific topics on them. So if there's areas or things that you want to go back and relook at or share with people, that YouTube channel is going to be the easiest way to do it. The other side of it is that we do have this, or a kind of a similar type of webinar that's meant for the specification community, architects, engineers, but that doesn't mean it's exclusively for them. It's an on-demand webinar, so it's something that people can just go in there and give their information and watch the webinar. So if you're trying to utilize it for additional people in your company, or if you're trying to utilize it for customers, you can definitely do that. The website for that is aiaspec.com. And you'll see there where it's got a heading or an icon for the webinar, and you can look at that. It's also got 3-part formatted CSI specifications if it's something where you're looking at getting relative humidity specified on your next project. Okay, well, it looks like those are the only questions I have. Again, thank everybody for your time. And if there's any questions that you have in the future, please don't hesitate. Again, Jason Spangler, 800-634-9961, extension 235. Thanks, and have a great day.